Hey, and welcome to iWizard. So today I'm going to be reading Chapter 1 of our forthcoming book, The Green Druid. This is Book 1 of the Gods of AEVUM series. This is the final chapter I'm going to read on this channel as we go through our agent hunting process and get the book ready for publication, hopefully in the nearish future. So get ready. All right, welcome back. Jordan here. So I'd like to unveil the first chapter of our book and read it aloud for you guys. And I'd love to get your feedback too, if you've got any comments or notes or anything like that. But first, a little update. So we've just begun the process of hunting for agents to represent our book in order to break into the world of traditional publishing and get your book published that way. You really need an agent. So we've been slowly hunting around. I think we've queried like 8 or 9 agents so far, who are interested in epic fantasy. If we end up failing in this process, we'll just, get a developmental editor and indie publish. But we're going to start first with traditional publishing and see if there's any interest there. So just a quick synopsis here, and then I'll get into chapter 1. Reason, equality, justice. These are the tenets of the Nephelian Republic, the greatest civilization that AEVUM has ever known, a civilization born of revolution. The Druids of old presided over an empire built upon chaos, inequality, and injustice. Theirs was a theocracy in which some could harness the powers of the gods, while others could not. After the revolution, the Druids were exiled eastward, their very existence erased from history. 5 centuries later, the truth remains buried, forgotten by the citizens of Nephela. Or so it would seem. During the public execution of a heretic, Soren Frey, a fisherman's son who desires nothing more than a simple life, receives a cryptic message. Its clues lead Soren and his best friend to an artifact they were never meant to see. This discovery sends the boys on a dangerous journey that threatens to upend everything they hold dear. But what happens when the truth is unbearable? In the wild east, where the last remnants of paganism and druid magic teeter on the brink of extinction, Danica Bear, a girl confined to a dark tower, learns the old ways. Her father, a powerful druid, dreams of toppling the Republic and bringing religion back to the West. To do so, he must unite the unruly eastern peoples, a religiously fragmented smattering of kingdoms, villages, and tribes. As Dani comes into her power, she will do all she can to advance her father's cause and earn his respect, even if it means taking matters into her own hands. In the end, Soren must make a choice: sit atop a republic of lies, or pursue the dangerous truth wherever it leads. Dani must decide whether the price of greatness is worth it, and whether the gods are behind her cause. When their paths cross, Soren and Dani's worlds will be thrown into tension, and nothing will ever be the same. In this first installment of the Gods of AEVUM series, readers will journey beyond good and evil in a beautiful but divided world. And so just for a reference point here, as we've been saying to agents, I think that if you're interested in Pat Rothfuss's Name of the Wind, especially for the school parts and the coming-of-age elements, this book would appeal to you. If you're interested in R. Scott Baker's Second Apocalypse series, especially for the philosophy and the sort of Nietzschean elements, I think you would probably like this book as well. The setting of the book and the sort of politics of the world take inspiration from Plato's Republic and the French Revolution. And so without further ado, I bring you Chapter 1 of The Green Druid, Book 1 of the Gods of AEVUM series. Even during the wee hours, the sea never ceased to whisper soft truths. The trick his dad told him was learning how to listen. Soren Frey opened his eyes in the pre-dawn gloom and listened to the lapping surf and cawing gulls. He inhaled the meditative breath as the harbingers of low tide battered his senses. The subtle shifting of the breeze touched with salt and sulfur, the balmy tang of brine and seaweed. He squinted hard, focusing his mind, that he might finally hear the whisper. Again, nothing. Evidently, he did not possess his father's gift for listening. Truth be told, he was pretty sure the IC had never spoken to him, not once in 16 years. It all depended on how you looked at it. Sometimes when you were lost or going through struggles, if you listened long enough, suddenly you knew what to do. Some inner voice spoke to you, and all at once you knew precisely how to make things right. But that was your conscience, not the sea. Having raised this objection as a young boy, he would never forget his Da's sagely rejoinder. Are you sure there's a difference? Lying back on the same misshapen mattress they had issued him all those years ago, he stared dazedly at the ceiling. He wished more than anything that his Da were here now. He would know what to do about Maeve. It struck him suddenly that he'd been away from his parents for more than a third of his life. In any case, it wouldn't be long. In a few short days, he would no longer have to wonder what his Da would say. In a few short days, he would take the stage at the placement ceremony, where he would see his folks for the first time in 6 years. And they would take him back home to Norport, where he would become a fisherman, just like his old man. In a few short days, reason willing, he could finally begin his life. He sat up in bed, stretched, and rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. Then he remembered. Pilib! Swinging his legs over the side of the bed, he leapt to his feet and pulled on yesterday's woolen trousers, throwing a rumpled shirt over his head. He tiptoed across his dorm, tossed a mesh sack out of the second-story window, and slipped into the night breeze, clinging to the outer pane with his right hand and wedging his left foot into a trellis before dropping soundlessly onto the soft grass below. That he now performed this maneuver in one fluid motion was a testament to repetition and muscle memory. In 6 years he'd yet to be caught, and more than nimble agility. Yet it would be his last covert expedition. He pulled his worn leather dock boots out of the sack and slipped them on. When he arrived at the secluded cove, he grabbed his hand trowel out of the sack. The shellfish beds were picked over today, so he scanned the wet sand, searching for the tiny air holes that hinted at buried clams, and got to work digging. He couldn't afford to be picky. Hard and soft clams, butter clams, large and small, even cockles. If it was fresh and juicy, it went into the bag. As he worked his way along the beach, hues of pink and tangerine began to lighten the sky, spilling out over the horizon like a fire rising from its embers. Though clamming could be tedious, the work evoked memories of home, got him working with his hands, reminded him where he truly belonged. Beyond being his family's lifeblood, the sea had a symbolic importance, Soren reflected. It represented something elusive and ungraspable about life itself. Every port from here to Craven's Bay had its own adage to this effect. No man ever sets sail in the same sea twice, so the saying went in Norport, for it is never the same sea, and he is never the same man. The adages varied, of course, but they were all variations on the same general theme, that the only constant in life is change. Every quartus or so, Pilib brought him a new one to chew on. He wondered what the old merchant would have for him today. As far back as he could remember, Soren had wanted to be a skipper, to own his own vessel and command his own crew like his Da or Pilib. This wasn't an unusual dream for a child raised in Norport, one of the many villages that dotted Sirde Kalath's eastern shore. For his mother, a silver soul, the thought was unconscionable. You are a silver at the very least, if not a gold, she had told him long ago. You most certainly do not belong in the producer class. It did little good to remind her that her own husband, Yasgar, was a member of the producer class. Your father is an iron soul, she would say, or have you forgotten about the Forge of Destiny? How could he forget? It had been drilled into him relentlessly from the time he was a wee lad. It was mandated that all children of the Republic memorize the doctrine. Citizens, you are brothers, yet nature has framed you differently. Some of you have the power of command, and these she has made of gold, wherefore they have the greatest honor. Others of silver and steel to be protectors, others again who are to be husbandmen and craftsmen she has made of iron, and so on. His mother's point, of course, was that his father was right where he belonged. There's no shame in it. Your father is doing what he was meant to do, what nature intended him to do. To defy the natural order is to defy destiny. Remember that, my son. Maeve, his sweetheart of 2 years, agreed wholeheartedly with his mother, and yet Soren could never figure out how they were so confident he possessed anything more than an iron or steel soul. They couldn't possibly know. In fact, wasn't that why he was here in the first place? Why the Republic took possession of the young? Sure, they told you it was about equal opportunity, but everyone knew it was really about separating the wheat from the chaff, about separating the silvers and golds from everyone else. Anyway, At Roque's placement ceremony, he'd finally know for sure. The first rays of Ignis warmed Soren's back and cast long shadows over the beach. It was nearly time to head over to the docks. He dug into the sodden sand above an oblong hole and in one quick motion plunged his arm up to the elbow to capture the retreating clam. He tossed it in the bag with the others and clambered back across the slippery rocks that guarded the secluded alcove, unrolling his trousers before trudging through the scratchy salt grass. The docks were a couple miles away. Soren jogged through the groggy, cobbled streets of Innisport with his morning's harvest slung over his shoulder. Pilib was tying off his boat when Soren came clomping down the dock. "Soren, my boy," Pilib greeted, rumpling his unruly raven hair. "I'm going to need a stool to reach you soon." "As you've mentioned on your last 3 berths," Soren said, smoothing his hair. "Aye, a ladder then, since you shot up from last time." Pilib stroked his salted beard and scrunched his leathery face, inspecting the boy. "No smarter, though. I was hoping you'd be wise enough not to show today. See you back in Norport next week, no?" "I figured every bit helps," Soren said, handing the weathered merchant his bag of clams. "How's Da?" "He's doing all right. Blinder than a cavefish, but still knotting those nets, the poor bastard." He paused and lifted the bag. "This don't add much, you know." He nodded. Pilib had been his neighbor before he'd been sent away to common school along with the other kids his age. Each summer thereafter, the students completed specialized apprenticeships based on their physical and academic performance. Students could submit summer preferences, but unlike his best friend Cam, whose father was a cartographer, Soren's requests to intern with his father were never approved. These clandestine check-ins with Pilib, then, were the only connection he'd had to his parents these many years, which just made letting go of them harder. The practice of separating children from their parents was as old as the Republic itself, and flowed directly from the second of its core values, those being reason, equality, and justice. Equality demanded that all children receive a clean educational slate, free from the corrupting habits and prejudices of their parents, in an environment that removed entirely the influence of class. For class was not inherited in Nephelian society, but realized justly on the basis of fitness. In a matter of days, Soren and his classmates would be placed ceremoniously into the classes to which they belonged, and with few exceptions would remain for life. "Is Ma back yet?" Soren asked hopefully. Her most recent Sea-Watch tour had shipped out in mid-autumn. "Nah, she's been gone more'n a half a cycle now." Pilib scratched his beard awkwardly and stared off into the distance, as if searching for the right words. "By the by, still Sirdai Kaloth's only undefeated sword fighter in your age group?" Soren's ears grew hot. Even Pilib knew to change the subject when it came to his mother. Just as well. Speaking it aloud would only make it worse. He wasn't sure why he'd even asked when he could see it in the man's eyes. His mother would not make it to the placement ceremony. 6 years and the woman still couldn't be bothered to show up on the most important day of his life. He finally answered Pilib. "Round here at least, though I imagine best swordsman in a place like Sirdai Kaloth isn't saying much." Even sword fighting was a contentious topic. Sure, it came naturally, and he loved the competitive element, but his talent, ironically, was also the reason his internship requests had been repeatedly denied, why his summers were occupied with long days of fencing, stick fighting, and broadsword combat, rather than fishing back in Norport. It wasn't up to him. Nothing was, in the end. Not even the class you belonged to. You could do your best to cheat the system, make them think you had an iron soul by playing dumb, by not studying, by racking up minor ethics violations so as to lower your character score. Soren had done all of that and more. He'd done all he could to manufacture the outcome he wanted. Still, at the end of the day, there were no guarantees. What if they saw through him? On paper, his record was clear. Middling grades, tolerable conduct. You could usually tell where a student was going to end up based on their record. Even so, there were always a few big surprises each year, and he knew he could be one of them, especially given his talent with the sword. "In any case," Pilib said, clasping Soren's shoulder, "Yas is very proud of you, and I know your mother would be too." His eyes twinkled. Soren clenched his fist over his heart. Reason, equality, justice. He turned to go. "I'll see you back at home." "Aren't you missing something?" Pilib said. "All these years I've been visiting you, and today's the day you forget?" "Sorry, Pilib," Soren sighed. "I've been distracted. Haven't really been myself these past few weeks." "You've got a lot on your mind, laddie, I know. Surprised you even made it out here, what with final exams going on and your placement coming up." "Let's have it then," Soren smiled. "This one's from the Sihan." "Sihana? You've been there?" "Course not, you lunker. Sihana's at the other end of the world. Besides, just paid this beauty off." Pilib gestured toward his vessel. You think I'm just gonna feed her to Yinka? I guess not, Soren laughed. Where'd you hear it then? A cantina in Palm City. Guy knew another guy who claimed he heard it from a pirate who used to ply the Iron Strait. Soren cocked his head incredulously. Doesn't matter where I heard it. Ready? This one's a thinker. Soren nodded. All right, here it is. You cannot understand life by trying to grasp it, just as you cannot capture the sea in a bucket, for once you have done so, it is no longer the sea. Pilib flashed a toothy grin. Back up, will ya? The watchman barked, slamming into the crowd and shoving them back a pace. Soren braced himself, glancing over his shoulder for the 10th time to scan the gathered faces. Late. Always late. He pocketed his token and stood back as the 2 honor guards, regal in their golden armor, breastplates bearing the daggered eye of Nefela, led the convicted man through the center of the audience toward the dais, prodding him with their clubs. As per custom, the prisoner had been garbed in motley for the occasion, a red frown smeared haphazardly across his painted face, fool's cap jingling as he stumbled forward. The reckonings were held outside in Innisport Commons, surrounding a great stone platform quarried from the local bedrock. The crowd parted for the sad clown, but hissed and jeered when he passed, pelting him with pebbles and rotten vegetables. Soren jostled through a mass of sweaty bodies to get a better look at the approaching figure. The man was old, at least 70, possibly older, yet he was lean and well-proportioned, his carriage dignified and erect. As he neared, Soren could see that underneath the smeared and cracking paint rested an oddly untroubled countenance. And it was at that moment, just as he passed, that the man's light blue eyes, serene as a cloudless sky in summer, stared directly into his own. The moment lasted a split second, but in that instant time seemed to protract. Those eyes, he knew with absolute certainty, were telling him something. Traitor! A voice shrieked in his ear. Startled, he snapped his head around to find a raggedy boy atop his father's shoulders. Traitor! The feral child squawked again, pointing at the prisoner and gesticulating wildly. Take off his bloody head! When he turned back, the moment had passed, and so had the man. His head. That's one possibility. Though really, you never knew how they were going to carry it out until right before they did it. Last 2 he'd attended had been hangings, coincidentally. He stood on his tiptoes and gauged the size of the gathering. By now there were hundreds of folks, which wasn't terribly surprising. Most people were here today for the same reason, procrastination. It was the last reckoning of the Quartus, and they'd put off their civic duty until the last minute, just as he had. Still, this was something else. He wasn't sure he'd ever attended a reckoning this large, and the sea of bodies was only growing. After a time, he spotted Cam at a distance, limping his way through the crowd like a peg-legged sea captain. His friend had a lost look on his face. Ahoy, matey, Soren called with a wave. Ah, Cam said, wriggling his way through the crowd. I knew I'd find you. What'd I miss? What took you so long? Soren asked. And why are you limping? It was that damned physical exam, Cam said. Truly, I don't see the point in it. Climb this rope, lift this stone, run this league, dive into this here water. I tell you, they're trying to kill me. Cam Mullen was a stocky lad, ruddy and ebullient, with flaxen curls that framed a smooth, jovial face. He was a few inches shorter than Soren, who stood around 6 feet, and though the two had been friends since before they could walk, it had only recently occurred to him what it was that made Cam such an effortless companion. While most lads their age ran around conveying a crafted impression of themselves to others, Cam was, as the ancient poet Gaba had put it, one of the true sort. He had a guileless, unself-conscious grace of manner and sharp blue eyes that seemed always to be set upon solving the problem of the moment. You aren't keeping in shape, Cam, Soren said, brushing a lock of hair away from his thistle-gray eyes. I took the exam same as you, and I'm fine. Look, it'd be one thing if I was going off to storm the Velvet Isles or patrol the Golden Forest like some battle guard officer. But I'm an intellectual, he said, mocking a supercilious air. Seriously, though, his face straightened. How is rope climbing relevant to my future? Is that your new title? Soren snorted. Intellectual? Well, it should be. If you ask me, the world is in desperate need of... No, you're quite right. I can see it now, Soren interrupted. You there, he pointed at Cam, imitating Pilib's gruff voice. My commercial fishing outfit is looking to hire, wait for it, an intellectual. Very funny, Cam said, then made an exaggerated show of holding his nose. At least I don't smell like a ripe sea turtle. Were you at it again this morning? Soren sniffed at his linen shirt. Yeah, I'm not smelling anything except for hard work and dedication, so... Cam's attention was diverted. Hey, is that your token? He asked, pointing at the ground. Soren dug into his right pocket, felt the hole at the bottom, then picked up the red chip. I guess it is, he said, shoving it into his left pocket. Good eyes, mate. Close call, Cam said. Can't think of a worse time to lose one of those. He was right. The tokens were like gold right about now. Every citizen in the Republic over the age of 10 had to hand in 3 civic participation tokens at the end of each quartus, 1 red, 1 orange, and 1 yellow, which meant you had just over 6 weeks to collect all 3. You earned a red for attending a reckoning, an orange for a correction, and a yellow for a denunciation. Reckonings were the hardest to watch, for obvious reasons, but corrections took longer and could be disturbing too. It just depended on the severity of the crime and whether the criminal remained unclean after the ordeal. Denunciations were embarrassing, to say the least, but you could easily come back from them. Plus, they were so frequent, they all kind of blurred together. Over time, you forgot who'd been denounced and who hadn't. I could say the same for you. Keep showing up late, Cam. One of these days, they're not going to let you in. You'll have to hit the streets at night, find a dealer. Day before a new quartus, I hear reds can go for 7 or 8 brins, easy. Well, I wouldn't know, would I? Cam said, cocking his head. I don't sneak out of my dorm at night to hang out with riffraff. By riffraff, are you referring to the mollusks or the crustaceans? Better yet, I'll just get an extra token from your sweetheart. Far as I can tell, the lass goes to more reckonings than that headsman up there, and he does it for a living. Oh, come on, Soren objected. First of all, Maeve would never deal in tokens. I bet she would for you. Second of all, he held a finger up, she's just trying to be a good citizen. You know how patriotic her family is. Oh, that's a right load of codswallop, and you know it, Cam laughed dismissively. I'm telling you, the girl actually likes watching these poor fools get strung up. You can just tell it fills her with righteous glee. She actually thinks they deserve it. They were beginning to get angry scowls from the people around them, and Soren could feel his cheeks getting hot. Some of them do. Cam said nothing, and a thorny silence came between them. Soren turned his attention to the platform, where the prisoners stood on the plinth at its center, flanked by his pair of honor guards, their lapis silk capes fluttering in the breeze. So, Cam said, breaking the awkward lull, who is this guy? Do we know yet? Haven't the faintest idea, Soren said. Crowd like this, though? No way he's a small fish. The man before you is none other than Einar, a gruff voice chimed in out of nowhere. Before Soren could figure out who the voice belonged to, the cloaked figure in front of them turned around. And he's a whale. The man was an imposing presence, with a thick-barreled chest and broad, slightly stooped shoulders. He looked bald, but the hood made it hard to tell for sure. And what would be your name? Cam asked. Ryder, the man said, hand emerging like a hermit crab from his billowy cloak. His forearm, Soren noticed as he shook Ryder's hand hesitantly. The man had a tattoo, a series of sigils trailing from wrist to inner elbow. The designs were vaguely familiar, but too intricate to place at a glance. This Einar, Soren pressed the man. Do you know him? Ryder smiled. Better perhaps than anyone, and yet it would be more truthful to say that I know him not. Wait, Cam said impatiently. So you know the guy or you don't? Can we ever really say we know another when we scarcely know ourselves? Look, pal, Cam interrupted. Enough with the cryptic bullshit. He shot a look at Soren that said, Do you believe this guy? Just tell us who he is. He was a teacher, Ryder said, his voice solemn. My teacher. As he spoke, a magistrate robed in white ascended the platform steps, accompanied by 2 more honor guards. He taught men and women, boys and girls, from all walks of life, anyone who yearned to know the philosopher's way. Fat lot of good that did him, Cam sniggered. Philosopher? Surely Soren hadn't heard him correctly. You mean to tell us that the man who's about to be executed is a member of the Philosophers Guild? A wire-thin smile crept over Ryder's face. Certainly not, the stranger laughed. Do you know what the name Einar means, Soren? Einar? Soren stared at the man quizzically, wondering how the stranger had known his name. He was sure he hadn't given it to him. I don't know, he said. It sounds upper Nephelian. It means one who fights alone. Einar was a member of neither guild nor tribe. Then why is he up there? Cam cut in. A new intensity came over the man's features. His voice dropped to a whisper. In a few moments, the regime that rules you will murder my teacher, a gentle soul whose only crime was loving wisdom, truth, and freedom. Why, you may ask? Why would they do such a thing? To an old man, no less? A deep pain crept into the stranger's voice. I will tell you why. Because he asked questions that a man of his station simply does not ask, if he wishes to live. To the Philosophers Guild, my teacher is a threat. But why is he a threat? Soren asked. Ah, that most dangerous of questions again. Put it this way. In a matter of seconds, that magistrate up there will read out a list of reasons cooked up by the Philosophers Guild. Einar is a terrorist, a conspiracist, a counter-revolutionary. Ryder spat in disgust. My teacher was none of those things. So why is the most powerful ruling body in AEVUM threatened by a poor beggar who can scarcely afford shoes? The truth is, they're not. But I don't, Soren stammered. It's not the man, Soren, Ryder interrupted. It's his message. Einar teaches that a philosopher is someone who is wise enough to know that he knows nothing. And that, lads, is precisely the danger. For a philosopher is a gadfly, he said, eyeing both of them in turn, and anyone can be a gadfly. He contemplated this, then stared into the stranger's intense eyes. How do you know my name? Soren asked, but before he could get an answer, their attention was captured by a low beating of drums. The crowd quieted and the drumming ceased. Citizens of Nefella, the robed magistrate announced, standing between the plinth and the gallows. She spoke with an air of supercilious boredom, her nasally voice like that of a tourist disgusted by the smell of low tide. On this Hydre, 44th day of Quartus 3, Ignis cycle, year 476 of Nephelian freedom, the man known as Einar of Liege will receive justice on the following charges: preaching false divinities, corrupting Nephelian citizens, preying on the youth, and disrupting social order. The District Court of Sirdai Kalath, certified by the Philosophers Guild, has ruled that Einar is guilty on all counts. The penalty is death by hanging in chains. The masked headsman, covered head to toe in golden chainmail, held up the human-shaped cage for dramatic effect. Gasps and low murmurs swept through the crowd. Cam and Soren looked at each other wide-eyed. Hanging in chains. As far as he knew, only 2 other people in the history of Sirdai Kalath had ever received that sentence. The last was more than 50 years ago, when Branach Creven, a craven drunkard, had set fire to the common school's dining hall during lunch. 27 lives were lost that day, including 22 children. Apparently the stench of Creven's decay had suffused the commons for more than a quartus. Had Einar's offenses been that bad? The magistrate clasped her fist over her heart. Reason, equality, justice. Soren mimicked the gesture and muttered, Reason, equality, justice, along with the rest of the crowd, many of whom were markedly more enthusiastic. He noticed Einar's student was no longer standing in front of them. Did you see Ryder leave? He asked Cam, who shrugged in response. As the ba-bum, ba-bum of the drums picked up pace, an honor guardsman whispered into the magistrate's ear. She nodded and stepped back a pace, allowing the guilty the opportunity to utter his final words in public, that his blasphemy might perish alongside his body. Einar made his way down the plinth toward the gallows, honor guards in tow, but stopped short, shaking his head and pointing into the crowd. The bells of his fool's cap danced around his head, making a mockery of his every motion. He said something to one of his guards, who descended the steps and disappeared, re-emerging a moment later, escorting a cloaked figure with a bald head. Ryder. Get on with it! One man hollered, prompting the crowd to launch more projectiles at Einar. The frenzy was making Soren's head hurt. Einar surveyed his audience stoically, sky-blue eyes once again settling unmistakably on Soren, but only for a moment. He felt an eerie chill skitter down his neck and shoulders. The chaos subsided and the crowd seemed to tilt forward in anticipation. My final words, the prisoner announced stoically, voice a warm and reedy timbre, are meant for one man, and one man alone. The guards led Ryder to a spot directly in front of his teacher. The 2 men, though physically restrained, were separated by mere feet. He shouted into Cam's ear, I don't think he's going to address the crowd. You'd think a philosopher would, Cam said, frowning. Soren could see Einar's lips moving, but it was impossible to make out what he was saying to Ryder. This incensed the mob, who, like a schoolmaster demanding a secret be shared with the whole class, erupted once again, jeering and whipping rotten vegetables at the doomed man. A potato the size of a bread loaf flew at Einar's head, but he ducked and it ricocheted hard off the guard's helm. Einar took this opportunity to lunge forward and embrace Ryder, clinging desperately to his student as he whispered his final words into the man's ear. The guard stepped forward and grabbed the men, disentangling them. Einar went without a struggle, smudging his white and red fool's makeup against his companion's cloak. But Ryder bucked his legs out like a wild horse, kicking the honor guard behind him in the groin. The card fell back, crumpling over as Ryder leapt off the platform into the crowd. 2 men in gold chased after him. Soren watched, captivated, as they dragged the clown with half a frown to the gallows. He did not struggle. The headsman placed the noose over Einar's head and helped the old man into his iron cage. Incoming, Cam yanked at Soren's left sleeve. The scene at the gallows went blurry as the crowd parted and a cloaked figure barreled through, slamming into Soren and jostling him. Ryder. The man grabbed his elbow and pressed a minuscule scroll into his right palm before continuing to shove through the crowd. Without thinking, Soren pocketed the scroll. "You all right? Did he—" Cam started, but cut himself off mid-sentence. "He gave you something," an approaching honor guard said, square jaw stern beneath his magnificent helm. "Empty your pockets." Soren stared unflinchingly at the guard, anxiety, curiosity, and confusion battling for control over his emotions. Anxiety over having the scroll in his possession, curiosity regarding its contents, and confusion as to why it was given to him, of all people. If he surrendered it to the guard without a fuss, he very likely wouldn't be punished. At the same time, everything in his body was telling him not to surrender it, at least not until he'd had a chance to read it. An idea struck him. Soren pushed the scroll, which had been lodged against his right thigh, through the hole at the bottom of his pocket, then pulled the empty pocket inside out so the guard could see it. "The coward nearly knocked me over," Soren said, sounding as innocent as he could. "But he didn't hand me anything, sir." "I saw you put something in your pocket," the guard pressed him. "Let's see the other." Soren reached into his left pocket, palmed his red token, and showed it to the guard. "You mean this?" he asked. "I was holding it when he charged into me. Nearly dropped it. Thought I should put it in my pocket for safekeeping. To lose this, the last reckoning of the Quartus, can't imagine what I would have done." He was rambling and needed to stop talking. "The lining," said the guard, pointing at the pocket with his club. "Fine, then. You being placed next week, kid?" he asked, glancing around distracted. "Yes, sir. Oral exams in a couple hours. I'm aiming for battle guard," Soren lied. "Good luck, son. Report if you see anything." The honor guardsman squeezed Soren's shoulder before moving on to question others in the crowd. When he turned his attention back to the gallows, Einar's iron collar was being locked around the head encasement, his fool's cap poking out between the bars. As a child, Soren had a set of nesting dolls with a Sea-Watch admiral painted on the outside. When you opened it, there was a captain inside, then a commander, and so on, all the way down to a tiny fish, the only doll that wasn't hollow. The shape of the iron contraption reminded him of a demented version of this toy. Except today wasn't a game, and the man inside wasn't hollow. He was body and soul, just like Soren. The headsman cranked a chain attached to a pulley, raising the cage high above the commons. At this, the crowd resumed its chanting, "Justice! Justice!" to the beat of the drums. An urge to help the man welled up in Soren, but was swallowed by a feeling of overwhelming impotence. This, like so many other things, was bigger than him. Overhead, the clouds parted. The headsman's golden chainmail sparkled menacingly as he locked the pulley, accepted the rope from his assistant, and tugged the noose rope taut, strangling Einar. The old man struggled and shook, his bells jingling merrily outside the cage. Patches of his face turned reddish-purple where the white paint had rubbed away, and his light blue eyes began to bulge. The next moment the bells stilled, and Einar's upright body hung lifeless in its cage, where it would stay until his flesh had been pecked away by carrion and only bone remained. It struck him as odd that the Republic referred to this punishment as a reckoning, for it seemed a skeleton in a cage could scarcely reckon with anything. But then he recalled the word's true meaning. They'd learned about it at school. To reckon meant to take something into account. The truth finally hit him. How naive he had been. Reckonings were not meant for the guilty. They were meant for the innocent. Einar's punishment had not been for his own sake, but for that of the gathered crowd, the citizens of Nefella. He bent down and retrieved the scroll that had tumbled down his trouser leg and settled at the top of his boot. He nudged Cam. "Let's get out of here." From the edge of a grassy, rock-studded promontory, Soren looked out south over the misty expanse of Innisport, bordered on the east by the Eye Sea and hemmed in from the north by the Green Mountains. Out of view to the west and northwest, the land opened up to a vast spread of green fields and rolling hills, dotted by farms and vineyards. Though known for its bustling dry docks, the village of Innisport had a hidden quality, engirdled not only by the mountains and sea, but by an imposing escarpment to the west, beyond which rolled fertile country as far as the eye could see. The promontory jutted out into the sunlight through an enclosure of trees and shrubbery, within which lay the ruins of an old church and its graveyard. For years, he and Cam had used the ruins as a private meeting place, a hideout visited by few, accessible only by cliff path. "Let me see it again," Cam asked for the 5th or 6th time. Soren had lost count. He skimmed the miniature scroll once more before handing it over. "I'll tell of a port on the sea that runs back again," it read. "Just east and north, there's sometimes an island, sometimes a pole. It really depends on Hydrus's pull. When the bell tolls a pull, find the dock. Heed the croup, but mind the clock. Crest the withers, mount the pole. Clear the canal that would hear the green knoll. Descend the coil during the salty kiss. Enter early and wait. Too late is a miss. Still your mind within the cavity you will find. The truth is hidden on the shelf. Open Numina and know thyself." Cam knitted his brows and moved his lips as he read, looking up in thought from time to time. "Well, at least we know the meaning of the first line. Do we? Or are we just seeing what we want to?" "I still think it could be any port in AEVUM," Soren said, crossing his arms. "I don't think so," Cam argued. "Reason number 1, he held up a finger. Tell of a port. Port is clearly capitalized because it's the name of a place, and Innis literally means tell. Reason 2, he held up a second finger. The sea that runs back again is obviously the eye sea. It's the same forward as backward. Reason 3, he held up a third. Einar was in Innisport. He's from Liege, Upper Nefella. Why else would he be here? It has to be Innisport." "Aye, aye, Captain," Soren rolled his eyes. There was too much to process. The scroll must have been passed from Einar to Ryder when they'd embraced. Otherwise, Ryder could have given it to Soren earlier and done so in a less conspicuous manner. His head still ached, and he was in no state of mind to be worrying about mysterious riddles, especially just before he had to sit his oral exam. Besides, he had other plans this morning. He tapped his foot impatiently as Cam's eyes flitted manically over the scroll. Soren snatched it away and began to roll it up. "Hey, why so crusty today?" Soren sighed, releasing 6 years' worth of tension, and softened for his best friend. It wasn't fair to be taking it out on him. "I forgot to tell you, I'm breaking it off with Maeve today." All right, folks, that's it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. I'm sure it'll change a little bit by the time this ends up being published. But thank you for listening to the full chapter if you've made it this far. And until next time, happy reading.